The first time I learned the impetus for a lot of the people early on who put together the public school system.
The origin story.
Yeah, it was really shocking.
There's no such thing as an average child. Every child's unique. Their education should be too. That's really the favorite message throughout the whole book. When we impose on kids that they're failures or that they're not proficient enough, it just drives me crazy. You have to say, not yet. That 3-letter word of yet adds so much strength to a kid, to a person who's struggling, that they know that there's still runway. It's a spiritual belief I have. It's a human belief I have.
Welcome back to the OpenEd podcast. I am here, Isaac Morehouse here, co-hosting with my co-author, Matt Bowman. How are you, Matt?
Doing well. Thanks, Isaac. Pretty exciting to have our book out, huh?
Yeah, this is amazing. So we just launched the brand new book, Open Education, How to Reimagine Learning, Ignite Curiosity, and Prepare Your Kids for Success. Really, this is Matt's book, and I just sort of like sneak a few things in there and slap my name on the front. This is from Matt's years, decades even, of experience and passion in the education space. Matt, I'm just from a very high level. How difficult was it to distill everything in your brain and all the things you care about and have experienced and seen and form it into a book, that process? Like, was that really tough or did it just flow out of you?
You know, it has taken a couple years of lots of different iterations of what to share, what to not share, because there are so many stories behind the scenes of what's in there, right? Of even just understanding families over and over again, listening to so many parents talking about their child's education that is just, it could have been 1,000 pages. And so the idea to just kind of think through what's the most impactful, what illustrations can we use, what stories can we use, what principles, tell the story the best. So yeah, it's been a couple year journey and was not easy to kind of narrow down because I could talk for hundreds of hours on all this stuff, and to just distill it down into what's impactful and hopefully really helpful for families took a lot of effort.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's kind of two different types of nonfiction books, whether you're writing about business or education or health. Type 1 is like smart, clear thinking or interesting thinker who's basically doing research. They're observing things that are happening. So let's say it's a business book. Here's all these businesses I looked at and I crunched numbers and I observed things. And from this, I sort of put together some common patterns. It's like this pattern recognition from kind of a distance observation, a more scientific approach. And then there's I'm writing a more memoir style. Here's what I learned running my own business or starting my own business. And of course, the more businesses you have run or started, or the more experiences you've had in there, both failure and success, the better that's going to be, because it's not going to just be like, hey, I did one thing once and it worked. So here's why it worked, right? Which may or may not be true. So you have the more like personal bottoms up. Here's a bunch of stuff that I stumbled my way through. And then the more top down, hey, I'm taking a 30,000 foot view, looking at hundreds of examples, doing some number crunching and coming up with some principles. This book actually has both.
It does.
And I really like that. I remember you called me after reading the physical edition in your hand for the first time, which is a different experience. And you're like, I don't really like the beginning and the end, but I like the middle. And I said, I'm the complete opposite. I like the beginning and the end, and the middle is kind of boring. You're like, I want the specific tactical stuff. And I'm like, I really like the high level analysis. So I think it's actually a good marriage of both of those things. It does provide research and some concepts and theories about education from a vast sort of historical sweep, but it's also got, you and I have multiple kids and have been learning in the trenches. And then we've both run programs with hundreds, or in your case, tens of thousands of kids, and seen from experience success and failure and a lot of things too. And I just think it's got a nice marriage of the personal and the research side.
It really is a good mix. And I really did not want it to read like a textbook ever. So even the research and the good background content doesn't read like a textbook. It's doable, it's accessible. You really can grasp those concepts really easily and well. And I think that's how it ended. It's turned out to be a really nice mix of both.
I've really enjoyed, even though I'm very much okay, once it's good enough, let's just get it out the door and not keep trying to refine it. I have actually appreciated in the final stretches when we had it 90% of the way there. Getting that last 10% right, the order, the structure, where the content goes, how it flows. You've done a really great job of like being very relentless about this just isn't quite right. And I tend to have a like, good enough, let's go, so it's been good. It's been good.
Well, that's why we're good co-authors, because we needed that balance. Because had you come and said, oh, we should take more time, that wouldn't have been helpful to the finish line. So it's nice to be able to have both saying, hey, it's good enough, go for it, and push me to get to the point where I'm comfortable that it's now good to go. I hope people enjoy it.
It's funny. There was a part in one of the drafts of the book. I think I ended up removing it, but we were talking about mastery-based learning or something to that effect. And I had a little story from my grandfather who always used to, he was like World War II vet, worked with his hands, did carpentry, did just constantly building and making stuff all the time. But he was not known for his like fine craftsmanship. Like if he built you a shelf or a table or something, like it was a little rough, but he just cranked out. He had tons of kids and grandkids. And so he'd be in his basement making like 50 bird feeders that he was going to give everyone at Christmas. And just like a one man, assembly line. But he always had this line if we're doing woodworking with him, good enough for who it's for.
No, we kept it, Isaac. We kept it.
Oh, we did keep it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, for some reason, there was some version where we're going back and forth.
No, I love it because really that dovetails into some of the content we talk about, which is don't pursue perfection. That pursuit is unattainable. None of us have it. Don't try to believe social media influencers whose lives look perfect. It's not there. So your grandpa's quote is spot on and aligns with that concept of in designing your child's education, don't pursue perfection. It's not something that is to be pursued. The messiness is in the experience is in the messiness.
Yeah. And it's contextual as well. And this kind of ties into what I was saying about, the complementary approaches on writing this book. There are certain contexts where you want to have a higher degree of mastery or perfection, and others where it really doesn't matter that much, where 80% really is good enough. And being able to know the difference and not have like a very absolutist approach. So I got started writing by just having a challenge to do daily blogging. And so for me, like needing to press publish every day on a new blog post for a year, and then eventually ended up doing it for many years, that very much required good enough for who it's for. And like that context, if I were to say I can only put it out into the world if it's perfect, I would never have been able to meet that challenge. A book is different. And I have to context switch. You're like, this is not your daily blogging. This is not your social media post. This is something different. It's more enduring. It's got to have more credibility. And I have to ratchet up, which doesn't come natural to me. But I think with education, that's a great question. Like, is this something that requires, I asked my daughter this, she's in a Spanish class at a homeschool co-op, and she'll get really upset if she gets less than like a 95. And I'm like, why? Like, are you mad that you're not as good at speaking Spanish as you want to be? And she's like, well, no, I don't think it's really tells me much about that. And I'm like, so what is it that makes you want that perfection? And I'm not trying to tell her she should or shouldn't. I'm just trying to get her to question, is this where I should put my effort and my energy?
That's a great point. Identifying there are times when it should matter and you do want to get that as close to nailed down as you can. But other times, 50, 60% is probably good enough for who it's for, to your grandpa.
So that's a great segue into we're going to kind of take this book section by section. So there are 3 parts, part 1, part 2, part 3, that the chapters are kind of divided into. And for today, we're just going to focus on part 1. I just chat a little bit about what's in here, give you a little preview, and talk a little bit about some of the things the parts that we like a lot. So part 1 is chapter 1, which is kind of a history of school and kind of education as it stands today, how it came about, different attempts at reform, how COVID really changed a lot of things, the sort of homeschool, school choice movements, ups and downs. Chapter 2 is really about standardized testing primarily, and kind of what that has done and what that has created in the incentives of the education system. And then chapter 3 is sort of a picture of a better version of goal setting for education than standardized testing. It's called Mastered or Not Yet. And Matt, I know you're really passionate about that. And I love that framework. It's funny. I didn't even have any concept of competency-based education, or I didn't know that this was a field that people were into. But when I first created the Praxis program, I just kind of stumbled upon, because I was trying to figure out a way to combine, and that's what the word praxis means, theory and practice, to combine that, like, there is an element of study and learning that makes you better at going and getting a job, which was really the goal of the program. So it's not just like, hey, go work and be an apprentice. Doing is how you learn. You learn most things that way. But there's also a time to reflect and learn. And when it came to demonstrating your competency at that component, I just sort of stumbled on having people do it through like creating projects or doing oral exams. But then we just had a simple, you mastered it or you didn't master it. And I don't think we call it mastered or not yet. Can't remember what we call it.
But the same principle.
If you weren't there, you could do it again, right? As
and
many
you can
times
come
as
back
you want.
and do it again. If you choose that you're a not yet, come on back, go refine, improve, take feedback, come back. And even in your daughter's example, if you aren't happy with 95%, come back when you want to finish that 5%. That's great. But if you are at a point where 80% is going to be good enough, say, my not yets are fine. I see those not yets, but I'm good enough. And I'm going to not come back to that exam. So that's why I love that part of your story of, when you say you went the oral exam round, then you said professors that you had helped judge that were blown away on how engaged those students were versus the kids they give tests to.
That's one of the sides of an open education that doesn't, I think, get enough attention. Not only is this so much better for learners, teachers have such a better experience when they get to have this kind of, like, when you're in a classroom of a bunch of kids who are just there to like, give me the tests and let me use AI to cheat as much as I can to get through the pain. It's not as fulfilling of an experience. When you're there with someone and they're engaged with you, that's just amazing. So I think that's it's a big plus. But I wanted to ask you, when did you first come across the concept of competency-based education or mastered and not yet? Is this something you stumbled on yourself or tried to implement when you were a teacher, or did you come across it through some books and some different thinkers in education? What got you hooked on it?
Yeah, so I do go back to so it must have been through some of my teacher preparation program. I give them some credit because when I first started as a teacher, what I had been trained to do was build rubrics. It's this idea of transparency in education starts with a very clear rubric. Here's what your project, very project-based. So in the 90s, when I started teaching, project-based learning was a big thing with rubrics to judge it. But then that was a very natural transition to when competency-based education vernacular became a thing where those rubrics, ahead of time exactly what you're going to be judged on. You self-evaluate. We did a lot of self-evaluation on your rubric, and then get an outside adult to judge it, right? And so you had all this feedback on your rubric, and you could see, the challenge is writing good rubrics that show exactly what you're expecting to get. And then if you've mastered it, you can see it. If you have some not yet, you can see that too. So I implemented project-based rubric assessments in 94 when I first started teaching. And then just to see how that has entered into a mainstream education vernacular and even, Southern New Hampshire University doing a whole college degree program, one of the few, actually the only one that's interdisciplinary, project-based, competency-based assessment is Southern New Hampshire, and we highlight them in our book. But others have tried to do that, but they use more of a test-based approach. You can test out of credits. That's a little bit, yes, that's competency-based or at least mastery-based, but not project-based if you demonstrated the skill. So anyway, I love all that stuff because it's very personal to me that we're all a bunch of not yets in life. It's a spiritual belief I have. It's a human belief I have. And when we impose on kids that they're failures, it just drives me crazy, or that they're not proficient enough, or they just aren't good enough. Just bugs me because you have to say not yet. They're not there yet. And that word, that 3-letter word of yet, adds so much strength to a kid, to a person who's struggling, that they know that there's still runway.
It's interesting when you see the contrast between what happens in the professional world, in the world of employment, and even just like relationships and other things we do in life, and what happens in the education system, which is supposed to prepare people for that. When you imagine like hiring for a business, And the only way you hire it is you just send out a multiple choice test and hundreds of people take it. And whoever did the best on it, you just bring on to the team. Like no one would do that. There may be a few jobs where that's one step or a final step or something
Right.
else, some very, very specific jobs with very specific knowledge. But the hiring process is really messy. It usually starts with something like a resume that's kind of just like, hey, here are my, grades and whatever else. That's really not the thing that the decision is based on. Then you go through like several interviews where you're trying to see, does this person know what I need them to know for this particular role? And what's weird in that process is sometimes you find out that they don't know as much as you thought you wanted them to about that role, but they do know something in another area that you didn't even think about, and you might end up hiring them anyway. And it's not this binary, it's such a complex thing. And they're talking to multiple people. And then you might ask them to do a project. Okay, send me a proposal of your first 30, 60, and 90 days on the job. And you're getting this feel that's so multidimensional, but somehow when it comes to the education system where it's like, okay, now let's see, are you good at something? Number grade, right? It's like,
and let's start the timer, and it's going to expire at 11:02. And if you don't have it turned in by there, you don't get anything.
yeah.
So there's this stress of the timer. It's the lack of transparency. Again, we cover all this stuff in that book, in that chapter of the book, that we don't even let teachers know what's going to be on the test. We say, oh, it aligns to these ambiguous standards in the sake of protecting, authenticity of the test. We don't tell anyone if it's on it. That's the opposite of transparency. Teachers need to know, parents need to know, students need to know. They need to prepare for it. And then we do gotchas. We do time tests. We say, don't talk to anyone. Like, where else in any business would you say, don't talk to experts to get your answers? It's the most ridiculous thing. Like, you have to do not email anybody. Do not have a Zoom call with anybody. Do not talk to anyone who knows what you're looking for. Like, that's the opposite of what we want people to learn how to do.
I remember one of my early jobs as a teen. I was working for a construction company framing houses, and the boss would just like yell something down. He'd be like, I need a 4-foot 2x4 with a 8-inch, whatever, a 45-degree angle and a 30-degree bevel. And I didn't know what any of this stuff was. And I'm just imagining if I just had to show up and then just like make a bunch of cuts and hand it to him. And he would either say, you're fired or we'll keep you. Like, I mean, it was crazy stressful. So you're like, okay, what's a bevel? What's the angle? How do I make the saw adjust the way that I want it to? Like
so you ask questions, you research, you're motivated. That's learning. It's not that you just, go do in the dark and then come show up and he says, wrong.
80% of your cuts were 80% of your cuts were wrong. You're out of here. And I'm sure they were at first.
And you can't have a second try.
Exactly. Right. Like, oh man. So let's talk a little bit about the part 1 of the book.
Yeah. The 3 chapters, just to help people who are listening. Chapter 1 is called The 200-Year-Old Trap. Chapter 2 is Students Are Not Standard. And chapter 3, Mastered or Not Yet. So what's your favorite of all that, Isaac?
Okay, so I'm going to cheat. I'm going to give 2 answers. My favorite chapter is actually chapter 1. I'm a sucker for the history of the education system because the first time I learned the impetus for a lot of the people early on who put together the public school system.
The origin story, yeah.
Yeah. When I realized like there was no broad-based public school system for the first couple hundred years of this country's. And when it came about, the goals were very different from what people would want the goals to be today. Now, that doesn't mean that people today have those same goals, but the fact that so many of the things, the structure, it was like, hey, it was modeled after a Prussian system whose people to go fight the government wanted them to fight
without questioning,
and just obey orders without really asking. Yeah, great. Like, hey, if we tell you to run into gunfire, you do it. So how do we create a system that gets people to think that way from the time they're children, right? Like kind of the core. So I love like that historical content. My favorite chapter, but I do have a favorite line in the book, the entire book. And this is reasons. There's the raging debate in sports about like who's the greatest of all time. And I'm a firm believer that Michael Jordan's the best basketball player ever. And I get really annoyed. And me and my friends have all these chats about this, when people are like, oh, LeBron James. I'm like, no, in that conversation. So chapter 3 opens with this failure. Now it says after that, at least he would be if he were graded like we grade our kids. But I just took a picture of just that first part and I sent it to my buddies on the sports chat. And I'm like, guess what I put just as a joke. But I chapter opening because it really gets, we're just talking about like LeBron James is a failure. If we apply this rubric to him, to any ball player, to any athlete, you mean you make 50%? That's it? Like on a grading scale? I mean,
Right.
we're talking F, right? And I think we go down and show like field goal percentage, 3-point percentage, free throw percentage. You know, the best he would be on here would be a D plus in any of those categories, right? Like I love just breaking us out and recognizing that things outside of the education world, we have a totally different way of them and measuring them. So that's my two-part answer. Part of your
Well,
part
good.
in
Well,
part one.
I'll take your two-part answer and mirror that. So first, I want to do a shout out to Amy's foreword. If you skip forewords in books, skip that in other books. Don't skip the foreword in this book. You've got to read Amy's foreword. She's my wife, co-founder of OpenEd, and what she lays out in her foreword just inspires me. And so definitely I want to do a shout out for the forward. It sets the table for everything you're going to read. So just make sure you don't skip that. Just what I really, we've talked about master and not yet, and I love that line of LeBron and Roger Federer and Simone Biles. But I love the quote that we questionably attribute to Albert Einstein, that if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life feeling stupid. And so we put in there a graphic that I hope you just digest as you read it. Can fish climb trees? No, they can't. And so why are we judging a fish on its ability to climb a tree when that just doesn't make sense? In the picture, the monkey is so excited. The squirrel is super, optimistic they'll perform well on the climb the tree exam, but the fish is terrified. And I like to ask people, which animal do they identify with in the picture? And, I look at it and I was probably like the horse in there. The horse looks very happy, confident that they can do anything. It's a beautiful horse in there, but they can't go climb the tree. But I am so confident in myself that I'm sure I could figure out a way to climb that tree. And so that's why I view the horse as just smiling and happy and confident, but still is not going to succeed like the monkey will. And so how frustrating is that concept? The elephant gives up because they know they're just going to push it over and see if they can get a D for that, right? And bring the teacher the tree itself and say, what grade do I get now? Right? And so it's just funny how we try to paint every child as the same, and by birth year and cohort, zip codes, that's the most illogical way to organize kids. It's the most illogical way to assess kids by having them all climb the same tree. It literally doesn't make sense for human development. And then seeing that for my own 5 children and their spouses that they've married and our grandkids. And we highlight this a lot in the book. There's no such thing as an average child. Every child's unique. Their education should be too. So that's really the favorite message throughout the whole book.
Love about when you that amazing quote, which it was Einstein. If you judge a fish ability to climb a tree, it will spend its whole life feeling dumb. There's one reaction to that, which is, okay, well then we gotta shield kids from the knowledge that they're not good at certain things and like protect them and make sure that they never know that they're actually not as good at this as somebody else because they might feel bad or not. And that's not productive either, right? Because you're creating fragile kids who, once they find out, they'll never forget. Vince Young, he was an amazing quarterback in college, goes to the NFL, and his first year, said was a #1 draft pick, heralded guy, draft bad team, as is usually the case, really struggled. And he said he sat in the parking lot of his car where he got booed. And he had never done anything but just win at every level he had ever played in sports for his entire life, and only ever just been praised because he was just so physical from elementary. And he said he sat in there like questioning his entire life. Like he didn't when he got booed. So I create kids where it's like, hey, we don't want you to know, don't do that activity because then you're as everyone else and you'll feel bad. But so how do you met with the recognition that everybody's different, everybody has different skills? And I thought this is actually kind of a fun, especially as a diverse range of skill types. it's kind of a fun atmosphere with that. I was driving home from baseball just the other night, kind of bummed because he said, Dad, I think I'm the slowest kid on the team. We run sprints. And he just runs kind of slow. He's kind of got like a gang. He's in that gangly phase where he's growing, hasn't quite got coordinated, but he actually has like a lot of power. And I said, do you ever watch Anthony Rizzo? He's the slowest base runner I've ever seen. If he hits a ground ball, there's no chance he's going to run. He's an amazing first baseman and he's a good hitter. Like he's won a World Series. I said, some guys are base stealing champions at home runs. Some guys like, you've got a whole mix and a team needs all of those. And I'm like, you may get faster and you want this and work to get faster, but knowing if you're a fish, you don't have to be ashamed of the fact you can't climb a tree, but you need to know that actually knowing what you're not good at is really a good thing. And if you put a stigma on not being good at something, that's really bad because then it incentivizes us to like, hide that fact from our kids or be crushed when we find out. And you want to have a balance. Like I want to know the things that I'm not good at and not let the fact that I'm not good at it crush. And I think that's like a hard thing to figure out and accomplish in an academic setting. But I think it's really important to not attain with that. But, hey, I'm just never, so I'm going to need some and not feel bad about it.
And it's not like, yeah, to your point, fish, then we should protect them and never make them do anything, hard. In later chapters, we talk about one of the most rewarding things is accomplishing something challenging. So it's not that we don't want kids to be challenged. The point is that fish, there are challenging things for that fish to discover. And once you find those things that each child is passionate about conquering, that experience produces learning and joy all in one.
I think that's as the hardest thing to figure out when your kid is just truly like, this is not for them. Why would I make them do it? They're miserable and it's not benefiting
find that
them.
line.
Yeah. And then there are other times where you got to push them a little bit. And I think ideally the older they get, the more they get to figure that out on their own. When my 6-year-old says, I don't want to practice piano, I'm going to say, sorry, do it anyway. If he's played piano for a couple years and I know he's able to make himself practice and he's able to be disciplined, but it's just not his thing and his timing's terrible. And he says, I don't want to play. Maybe that's a difference. It is people with the opportunity in an environment that is not high stakes, I think is better. Hey, here's a tree. Anybody want to climb? And if some people take to it and some don't, okay, cool. More of that, less for others versus here's the test. You all have to do it. And you're all going to be, don't do it.
And that's definitely a good teaser for the next episode and the next section of really giving your child a voice is such a key. And people say, oh, you just let kids do whatever they want. No, that's not the point. The point is give them some autonomy, give them some agency based on their developmental levels and all that stuff. They still need adults and teachers and coaches in the room, but don't dismiss giving them a voice and choice in some of that. So we'll cover that on the next one.
I love it. That's a great teaser, great setup. We'll come back next part 2, which gets much more Matt's favorite, gets tactical and really walking through some ideas, some examples, how to do
just
this
really
with
give
your
a
kids.
playbook
So,
on
Matt,
parents that want some help to just start at the beginning, what to do. We find a lot of families just don't know where to start. And so that's why we did want to get tactical and practical. So part 2 definitely gives you a lot of tactical things you can do in your family today.
Absolutely. Excited to jump. If you want to go to opened.co/book, you can find a link to get the book on Amazon. You can find a bunch of other stuff we got on there as well. We want to spread the concept, not just the book, but just the concept of opening up your education. So if you encounter someone, one of those books where you're at the playground and you hear another parent say, I kind of want to do something different. I thought about homeschooling or a virtual school but I'm just not sure. That's a perfect person for.
Sure.
Matt, any
thanks, man.
thoughts?
It's been a great experience to get this published and out the door. I appreciate all your work, Isaac. Thank you.